This first 100 days of the Trump administration will go down in history as the greatest grift in the history of our economy in terms of the amount of money stolen and the size of it over the shortest period. Just some data here. Trump-affiliated entities have made at least $300 million in trading fees. The Trump family's net worth has increased by $3 billion or $1 billion a month since he took office. Just some timeline. The Trump coin launched on a Friday night under cover of dark with all the news about the inauguration. By 3 a.m. on Sunday, it was valued at more than $70 billion. And there were a small number of investors who made large investments on a Friday. Maybe they got a tip or something. They made tens, if not hundreds of millions. And then over the course of the next couple weeks, about 800,000 smaller investors lost billions. This market manipulation, this what would technically be called insider trading by the SEC, we'll never know because on April 8th, Trump's deputy attorney general ordered the DOJ's crypto fraud investigation arm to disband. Trump posted on Truth Social, "This is a great time to buy Donald Trump Media at 9:37 a.m. Between 1 and 1:10 p.m., there was a huge increase in bullish zero-day S&P 500 call options. And then just 8 minutes later, Trump announced a 90-day pause on all of his tariffs, and the market soared almost 10%, one of the biggest one-day gains in history. So someone knew what was going on.
Of course they do. He calls them.
That's called insider trading. The market gained $4 trillion while Trump Media closed up 23%, increased his net worth by $415 million. On April 23rd, Trump announced that the top holders of the Trump coin would win an exclusive dinner with him, and the coin surged over 60%. Just 58 wallets made more than $10 million apiece, totaling approximately $1.1 billion in gains. Meanwhile, 800,000 wallets of mostly smaller holders have lost money on their Trump coin. And it gets worse. Now the kids went on it. World Liberty Financial, a crypto firm run by Trump's sons, Eric and Don Jr., and they are entitled to 75% of its revenue. And now it's being leveraged to facilitate pardons for criminals. Justin Sun, a crypto billionaire, was under SEC investigation for securities fraud after investing $75 million in World Liberty Financial. Guess what, Kara? The SEC dismissed his case. This is what fucking infuriates me. I'm a realpolitik guy. I don't mind a little bit of corruption as long as it's good for all Americans. I don't mind a little bit of strong arming. But here's the problem, or the tragedy. If Trump brought half the competence, expertise, and elegance to governance as he does to grifting, the country would be in a much better place. We have a mob family running the country. That's the bad news. The worst thing is that Michael Corleone is managing the crime, and Fredo is managing the government. You are so good at stealing. Can you bring some of that elegance, that expertise to the government?
All right, Shalom. There's a brother Nahalia from the GMS Orlando camp. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yashar Allah, and a sincere salutation to all Yuakim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwath, who will believe in this word in all truth and in sincerity. All right, I'd like to go into a lesson through the Spirit based on the clip that you just saw of Scott Galloway, or Professor Galloway, all right, who's an American public speaker, a podcaster, entrepreneur, etc. He was in the headlines not too long ago about basically taxing the rich, all right, and the situation that is happening in Babylon the Great, which is America, which is basically the wealth gap is increasing. All right. And I wanted to deal with the highlights of President Trump's first few months, all right, in office, and what he highlighted, which is basically that Trump is grifting the American people. All right. Now, real quick, there's Ecclesiasticus chapter 14 and verse 5. And it reads, "He that is evil to himself, to whom will he be good? He shall not take pleasure in his goods. There is none worse than he that envieth himself, and this is a recompense of his wickedness. And if he doeth good, he doeth it unwillingly, and at the last he will declare his wickedness." All right, now the point of this scripture is verse 5 is that he that is evil to himself, to whom will he be good? Because when you think about the mantra of Make America Great Again, that's basically a dog whistle to the average so-called white man. All right, with a basically a promise, if you will, that he will restore the so-called white privilege that the average so-called white man used to experience. Because when you think about Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, when has America ever been great for Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans? And the answer is it's never been great. All right. And this is why, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shai, we understand that we are entering into another phase of prophecy, if you will. All right. Because ultimately, this is going to justify, all right, the average so-called white man to go against his own government. All right. So I want to go here. This is 2nd Ezra chapter 15 and verse 14. Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. All right. And the Lord is using these events, all right, to basically allow the average so-called white person to be enraged. You know, they're going to realize that they were sold a dream that was never intended to come true. All right. The dream of making America great again for the average so-called white man is just that. It's a dream. And Trump used that to get in office. And Galloway, all right, Professor Galloway basically pointed out all the policies and all of the insider trading that's been going on that has enriched Trump as well as his close circle. All right. Dealing with 0-day expiration options, which is extremely risky. The only reason you would get a 0-day option, all right, a spy option that expires the same day, is if you had some information, all right, that would possess you to get that. That's an extremely risky investment. All right. And this shows you that what Trump what he's basically doing, all right, in so many words, is he's enriching his friends and his close circle while giving the average so-called white person symbolic victories. No real substance, no real policy change that will affect their personal life. It's all a pony show. All right. It's all a symbolic victory. All right. The critical race theory. All right. Even the whole deportation thing is to make the average so-called white man feel like Trump is fighting for their best interests. Meanwhile, the big, beautiful bill is going to tax some of the poorest of the working class, which includes so-called white people. All right. So on one end, he's doing these visible things of progress. All right. For the average so-called white man to be appeased. All right. While on the other side of it, putting policies in place and doing insider trading to enrich his own people. All right. And when I say his own people, I'm talking about his close circle. And that's why I went to Ecclesiastes, the 14th chapter. All right. In the 5th verse, because again, it says, he that is evil to himself, to whom will he be good? If he's willing to lie to his own people, what do you Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans expect? All right. Even when you look at the policies, all right, the policies with the big, beautiful bill. All right. They're basically set up to take the dependents, the child dependents, the age from 18 to, I believe, 8 or 9. All right, correct me if I'm wrong. But what that basically means is that after age 8 or 9, that child is no longer a dependent, which means that if you are applying for benefits, all right, whether it be food stamps, etc., that child that passes the age of 8 or 9 is no longer qualified as a dependent, which means you won't qualify for those benefits. But then he'll free or pardon Larry Hoover from a federal case, from federal custody. And he really isn't free because, again, the state can pick it up and he can still do time, which is like 110-year sentence in state instead of federal. But this is Trump's MO, right? He'll give you symbolic victories, all right, while behind closed doors, when you look at the policies, it's all about the liquidation of the wealth of Babylon the Great, which is America, into the hands of the super rich. He's not going to help the average so-called white man. And this is why the scriptures say, he that is evil to himself, to whom will he be good? And our people are expecting something from a nation of people that don't have the ability to give compassion. They don't have the ability to give equity. That's not inside of them. All right. Matter of fact, let's go to Jeremiah. And it's beautiful through the spirit. We don't have any compassion for the average so-called white man who's being finessed by his own people. Because when you look at the history, it was the average so-called white man, the so-called blue collar so-called white man who was lynching Jake. All right, the ultra rich weren't hopping off their high horse to get their hands dirty by grabbing up a so-called Negro, Latino, or Native American and putting them on a tree. It was the blue collar workers, the average so-called white man that was doing that. So we have no pity or compassion for them being deceived by their own people. All right, this is Jeremiah 13:23. It says, can the Ethiopian change his skin or the leopard his spots? Then may he also do good that are accustomed to do evil. All right, and the answer is no. There's not a good bone in Esau's body. Look at how he's treating his own people. He's deceived his own people. The same blueprint that he's using against the so-called black community by taking away stamps, all right, by cutting Medicaid, which is going to affect you Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, particularly the women, all right, because Eve has been able to survive because as a single parent, she qualifies for certain benefits. So he's attacking that, but then he'll give you, I pardon Larry Hoover and NBA Youngboy. And if you're naive enough to believe that, you'll look at that like he's not racist after all. He's not, he's for us after all. He's trying to look out for us. And he's doing the same thing with his own community, the average so-called white man. He's giving them these public displays of I'm fighting for you, like the critical race theory, DEI, the whole pony show with the South African president coming up and accusing the South African president of having a so-called white genocide in his country, which was proven to be false. All right, but he's doing that to visibly appease the average so-called white man. While when you look at the policies, he's not putting anything in place to actually help them. Their personal life hasn't changed at all. If not, it's getting worse. All right, a lot of those Doge budget cuts affected so-called white people who had jobs in the government that lost their jobs due to that. You're seeing more layoffs happen. And it's not just affecting so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. All right, it's affecting Eve. All right, when you deal with the Southern Kingdom, the so-called black woman, it's affecting her, but it's also affecting the average so-called white man. All right, and we know through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shah that everything according to prophecy is playing out before our eyes. All right, the Lord has put the spirit on Trump to make these policies because we know you can do nothing against the truth but for it. All right, and that's why this doesn't catch us off guard. We don't look at these policies and become surprised by what Esau Edom is doing. All right, we understand that this is a part of prophecy. These are the small steps toward major prophecy. All right, this Proverbs 21:1. It says, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. And it's beautiful because the same evil that Esau Edom, the so-called white man, has executed against Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, according to policy, he's now doing against his own people. Giving them the symbolic victories of progress while destroying them beneath the surface. And this is why you're going to see the average so-called white person enraged, and you're going to see more incidents of road rage, of mass shootings, because ultimately what's happening through the spirit is the Lord is putting the spirit on these leaders of Esau Edom to prey upon their own people, because ultimately sedition is going to happen. All right, and these are all provocations that the Lord is using to lead up to major prophecy. And one of the major prophecies, all right, is sedition. All right. Matter of fact, this is Isaiah chapter 19 and verse 2. And the reason I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight everyone against his brother, and everyone against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. And the spirit of Egypt shall fail in the midst thereof. And I will destroy the counsel thereof, and they shall seek to the idols, and to the charmers, and to them that have familiar spirits, and to the wizards. And the Lord is setting these things up in place because these policies are no longer just affecting so-called minorities. The average so-called white man wasn't saying we all bleed red, brother, when it was just us going through this, when we were experiencing redlining. All right, when we were experiencing discrimination. All right, when our livelihood was based on living check to check. When that was our reality and only our reality, the so-called white man didn't say we all bleed red. But now that policy has changed and their elites are now putting them in the food chain, they're saying certain things like that. But ultimately, we know through the spirit, all of this leads to sedition. All of this leads down the path of sedition through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shai. And we're looking at Esau Edom finesse his own people. The same moves that he made against us as a nation of people, he's now making against his own people. Using these symbolic victories like how they will prop up Michael Jordan and LeBron James and Jay-Z's and Lil Wayne's to tell our people, look, we've gotten farther than we thought we were. All right, we've progressed past slavery while maintaining policies that keep us as a nation of people in the same position. Now he's doing the same playbook on his own people. The so-called blue-collar white man who believed that Trump had his best interests at heart. And Scott Galloway just pointed out a few of many examples of him getting in office and making sure that he got richer, all right, and that his close circle got richer, which is what it's all about at this point. And the last person to get the memo is 2/3 of our people and the average so-called white man. They're the last ones to get the memo that it's no longer about your color, that your own elites have threw your so-called privilege to the wind to increase their own power and control and money. Because when that money goes into the pockets of the rich, it's not coming out of the pockets of you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, because you don't have shit anyway. It's coming out of the pockets of these working class so-called white people. All right. Now I want to go here. There's Ecclesiastes chapter 13 and verse 3. All right. It reads, the rich man hath done wrong, and yet he threateneth withal. The poor is wronged, and he must entreat also. If thou be for his profit, he will use thee. But if thou have nothing, he will forsake thee. If thou have anything, he will live with thee. Yea, he will make thee bare and will not be sorry for it. Now, it was okay when he was doing that to us. The so-called white man, average so-called white man, had no problem when that was what he was doing to us, Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, and other nations of people. But now those chickens are coming home to roost. Verse 6 reads, if he have need of thee, he will deceive thee and smile upon thee and put thee in hope. He will speak thee fair and say, what wantest thou? And that's what he did to the average so-called white man. He said, look, I'm going to make America great again, which is basically a dog whistle for making America the privilege that the average so-called white person experienced in America, returning that to them, because that's when America was great for the average so-called white man, when they could experience a certain level of privilege that made them feel closer to the rich, even though they didn't have the same type of bank account. Now, the rich have gotten so greedy that they're now willing to destroy their own people. And see, the average so-called white person is still being put in hope to believe that that's not the case. But there is going to come a time, there is going to come a moment where they realize that they too have been finessed, and they're going to come down with great wrath. All right, verse 7 reads, and he will shame thee by his meats until he have drawn thee dry twice or thrice. And at the last he will laugh thee to scorn afterward. When he seeth thee, he will forsake thee and shake his head at thee. Beware that thou be not deceived and brought down in thy jollity. If thou be invited of a mighty man, withdraw thyself, and so much the more he will invite thee. Press thou not upon him, lest thou be put back. Stand not far off, lest thou be forgotten. Affect not to be made equal unto him in talk, and believe not his many words, for with communication he will tempt thee, and smiling upon thee will get out thy secrets. But cruelly he will lay up thy words, and will not spare to do thee hurt, and to put thee in prison. All right, and you have to understand that the MO that Esau has used, he's now using against his own people. And his own people don't realize that they're no longer off limits. This is why you're starting to see the average so-called white man be more proud as far as their their hate towards you Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Because they have this rich man, all right, the rich of their people, putting them in hope. And it's a false hope. Because while he's making them feel like things are getting better for them, he's robbing them. His policies are being put in place to make life harder for them. And they don't realize that. And this is the old trick, the Lyndon B. Johnson trick. If you make them feel like they're better than the best so-called black man, you can rob them blind. They'll give you the money. All right. Continuing. This is Ecclesiastes 13:13. It says, observe and take good heed, for thou walkest in peril of thy overthrowing. When thou hearest these things, awaken thy sleep. And see, the elect, Lord willing we be a part of that number, are not ignorant of these devices. Lord willing we be a part of that number. We're not ignorant of the fact that Esau, Edom, is evil. And his deception, he'll smile upon you. But when you look at his actions show his hate. The elect are aware of that. 2/3 of our people are not aware of that. All right. And at this point, 2/3 of the so-called, well, I won't even say 2/3, but the majority of the so-called white men are not aware of this, man. They're not aware that they've become prey to their own people. That the ones who have all the power are smiling upon them and putting them in hope, like he's done to us time and time again, and robbing them blind. Because you have to understand the increase of the wealth gap doesn't really affect you Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans as much as it affects the working class so-called white people. Because the middle class was pretty much predominantly occupied by the so-called white man. So when they talk about the middle class disappearing, they're talking about the wealth of the so-called white man, the average, the working so-called white man being translated. And it's not into the hands of you Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. It's into the hands of those who look just like them. And this is why it's going to boil down to sedition. Ultimately, they're going to have to fight. All right. And these examples that Scott Galloway brought out, all right, are plain, all right, to the pure. All right, Lord willing, we be a part of that number because we understand, according to prophecy, the Lord is setting this place up for a big fall. And a part of that, all right, is sedition. All right, once the average so-called white person realizes the game isn't worth playing anymore, they're going to revolt, man. All right, they're going to revolt. And it's because they put themselves in hope and believing that a guy like Trump, who has always been a part of the elite class, he's not a bottom from the bottom to the top type of guy. He's always been a part of that rich class. He's just been able to speak in a language that's put the average so-called white person in hope. But when you look at his policies, they're not helping the average so-called white man. And that's why we don't feel bad for you, man. All right, the second Esdras 15 and 15. I'll start at 14 in the GNT. All right, it says the world and the people in it are doomed. The war that will bring their destruction is very near. Nations will arm themselves and fight against other nations. There will be great political turmoil, with one group trying to overpower another and gain control while ignoring the legitimate government. And what's grounds for ignoring the legitimate government? Being deceived by them. You know, if you look at it, just look at the world and the state of the world at this point. It's not getting better for the average so-called white person. No matter what they see on TV. And Trump has put them in hope by saying, look, we got rid of the DEI hires. All right, we got rid of this. We got rid of that. Look, we're going to do critical race theory. Or if they start to try to put this conversation about oppression and how America was really made and founded, if they do that, we're not going to fund their schools. And the average so-called white person is seeing that and they're believing that, oh, all right, he's actually fighting for us. But those cost him nothing. It don't cost him nothing to say that. Meanwhile, he's putting policies in place that make the rich richer, all right, and that make the poor poorer, all right? And the middle class is really right in between that. They're one step from one or the other. And at this point, they're being one step closer to being poor than anything else. And they don't realize that because when they turn on CNN and Fox News, they see all of this about DEI hires. They see all of this about shit that doesn't really affect their personal life. It just makes them feel like they're a part of a team and they're winning. But when they realize the big scam, the big finesse, they're going to revolt, man. All right. And it's going to equal sedition. Because that's what this game has always been played like. It's always been about insider trading. It's always been about scams. It's always been about who knows who. It's always been about rich. Even amongst the so-called white man, when you go back to the plantation days, you had the taskmasters. All right, you had the ones who were rich, but at the same time, because they were rich, the way that they made the average so-called white person feel better about themselves is they put them over niggas, all right, Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans and other so-called minorities. And that's how the average so-called white person who was poor was made to feel like he was on an equal footing, because at least he was better than niggas. Well, now that rug is being pulled from under them, man. And this is why ultimately they're going to come down with great wrath. And they're not going to regard their government. They're not going to regard their kings nor princes. They're not going to regard guys like Trump, because they're going to realize that the same way Obama was used to finesse us, Trump is now being used to finesse them, man. Call Allah me al-Bashim al-Shah. As a matter of fact, this is Galatians chapter 6 and verse 7. And it reads, "Be not deceived, for Yahweh Shema Shah is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap." And see, the so-called white man has sown evil, and now he's beginning to reap it. And it's beautiful, because who's beginning to reap it on the so-called white man's side? His most vulnerable, the poor and working class so-called white person. But the same finesse that he used against us, he's now using against our own people, against his own people, man. And that's why we don't feel bad for him, man. We're not crying tears for the average so-called white person losing on this side, man. Because we understand his judgment. The Lord said he likened his judgment unto a ring. What goes around comes back around, man. All right, so Lord willing, this was edifying. With that, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Ruach HaKodesh. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yasher Allah, and a sincere salutation to all Yuakim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwath, who are believing this word in all truth and in sincerity. Shalom.